The guards rushed to the wounded man. The girl exclaimed, "Could they really defeat the boss of the dungeon of the Library of Mysteries?" The man laughed and said, "Of course, they are bank adventurers." The girl smiled and apologized for being so quick with him. A man appeared from behind and asked if they had cleared the dungeon. He scratched his head and said that he came here to practice his skills in this dungeon, but he didn't expect that they had already beaten him to it. Tuya looked at them and said that they had dealt with them quickly. Frowning, he added that civilians do whatever they want and don't think about the consequences at all. The blonde screamed that they were adventurers and were risking their lives to cover their asses and clear the dungeon. Ikoma gestured for her to shut up and apologized to the soldier because they were tired after the clearing, especially her. That's why she was being rude. There was no point in making enemies in the special forces and asked her to calm down. The girl screamed that she was not finished with him yet. The brunette raised his hand. Ikoma thought that in the special forces almost everyone treats adventurers like ordinary civilians. Adventurers appear due to the desire of ordinary people to protect others and also explore the dungeon legally. But the special forces closely monitor the activities of adventurers. It is dangerous to mess with them. They can also revoke the license. The guy sighed tiredly. Looking at the soldier, he thought that in the future the special forces will completely control the activities of adventurers. But now they can do nothing to them except snap back once again. The man frowned. A girl came up to him from behind and asked the lieutenant not to start unnecessary quarrels. She looked at him pitifully and said that she had leaked the main thing, that now the dungeon does not pose a threat to people. Ikoma said that they wanted to inform about one guy. This man tried to steal all the loot they got in the dungeon. The brunette looked at him menacingly. The lieutenant turned in the indicated direction. The young man looked at the man and tried to argue that it was just a misunderstanding in the group, but the blonde interrupted him and started yelling at him to shut up because he was trying to kill them and take everything from the thing for himself. Ikoma, looking at this, said that it was up to the guild to decide. It seemed that he should have a criminal record in another branch. He frowned and thought, judging by his behavior, this was not the first time he did something like this. He was sure that complaints had already been received about him from other adventurers. The herdsmen were seeing off the wounded man. Ikoma approached the soldier and said that in addition to this, something else happened while exploring the dungeon. He remembered the appearance of the enemy and said that they were attacked by two members from the Chimera Fong organization, a blonde and a tall bald man. Tuya's eyes widened in surprise. He frowned and asked if he was sure about it, because if it was just a joke, then it wasn't funny. The guy said that it was true. He would make a detailed report to the guild and send it to the special forces for verification. The brunette frowned and thought that this kid was definitely suspicious. Ikoma, walking away, thought that the soldier was a creepy guy. Tuya scratched his head and said that he couldn't ignore such a statement, and ordered to contact the headquarters immediately. The sun was shining on the building. 3 people were sitting at the table. The man and the girl were looking at each other from under their brows. The man was typing on the computer. The sunset rays illuminated the building. The 4 were walking down the street. They were finally released. The girls started to complain how simple it would be if this bastard thief didn't create unnecessary problems. She didn't expect more from a thief, just a slippery and disgusting guy. She would never trust people of the thief class again. All these words felt like a heavy burden on the shoulders of Ikoma. Unable to bear all this, the guy shouted that not all people with the thief class are bad. They are also honest, respectable citizens. The girl did not understand why he was upset. The blonde smiled and told them not to grumble. Everything ended on a good note, and besides, the whole share was now theirs. He smiled widely while saying this. The girl said that he always only thinks about money. He only asked if they were sure that they did not want to split the reward 4 ways. Ikoma smiled and reminded them that they had already agreed the entire reward would go to them in exchange for this ring, and he did not regret anything. He examined the ring on his finger. Approaching the fork, the blonde said that they had come to them from another area and the station was in that direction. He smiled and added that he was so glad that he was able to meet such good guys. The 2 listened to him attentively. Seiji remembered that he initially wanted to use them as a workforce for the sake of capturing the dungeon. He was driven only by greed. Next time he wants to give it his all. Money signs were burning in his eyes. Smiling broadly, the man said that when a new dungeon appears, He will not stand aside but will help his comrades. He wants to become the same as them. Ikoma listened to this with a smile. Cheyenne hit Satsuki in the side. The blonde looked at Satsuki and apologized for her rudeness because they were much stronger than she thought, and without them, they would not have made it. If they needed a company to conquer the dungeon, they could call them. She was always for any action. Ikoma smiled and thanked them for everything, adding that they would keep it in mind. The city was illuminated by the sunset rays. The two were walking down the street. The girl asked what this object was, the Ring of Wisdom. Ikoma replied that this ring could summon a legendary creature, and he could show how it worked. They approached the playground. The young man shouted, "May Akasha from the Library of Mysteries appear." A mage appeared in the air. The girl exclaimed that this was Akasha. At least she looked like her. Raising her head up, she added that she was smaller and cuter. The guy replied that this was Akasha, but in a weakened form. He could use her skills by spending his mana, although they were not as powerful. Akasha took hold of the human finger. The guy raised his head up and said that although her magic was not as strong and consumed too much magic, having her in his arsenal increased the range of his abilities. Satsuki said that she was indeed useful. But could this little girl really reveal to them the phenomenon of the appearance of dungeon? She looked at the slide and Ikoma said that Akasha was considered one of the most unique monsters. He raised his head up and said that she could speak their language. Akasha looked at them. She saw two girls fighting. Summon monsters have the same level as the summoner. Some monsters have a special parameter that increases depending on their level. Akasha has this unique parameter of wisdom. If he continues to increase his level, one day he will be able to ask her about the secret of the appearance of dungeon. The girl landed next to him on the ground. The boy extended his hand to her. Satsuki stepped back and asked what she wanted to say. Ikoma calmly replied that she couldn't talk properly because her level was too low. Akasha began to rise into the air. She hovered there and said, "The end. This world will soon meet its end." The two looked at her in surprise. The lantern was on. The building was illuminated by sunlight. The man threw the phone at the wall and said that the chimera phone couldn't handle such a simple task. The broken phone lay on the floor. The man glanced at the laptop screen. He pressed a few keys on the keyboard. Thinking about Ikoma, he began to reflect that he had cleared a huge number of dungeons. He was the first adventurer in history who could so easily obtain A rank. The adventurer who so easily saved people from the dungeon disaster, and the one who defeated the elite member from the Chimera Fang. Remembering the ring, he thought that he had taken the wisdom ring. The man stared at Ikoma's photo, saying that he was an unusual person, someone who was living his second life, a master of gravity. His eyes lit up, and he told him not to think that he could hide from him so easily. A monster was running from a deep pit. Ikoma extended his hand and called on gravity magic. He struck and received 768 experience points. The girl turned her head and said that even though they were surrounded, Ikoma dealt with them so easily. The second added that she expected nothing less from him. If she had a manager, she would have requested a collaboration with him. The young man closed his eyes and asked him to stop using him to promote his broadcasts. The guy frowned and thought that he had decided to start leveling up, but at level 40, it was much harder to do such things. He remembered how the monster was running towards him. Even with Satsuki alone, they were having trouble coping. So they decided to call Hashinen, and she didn't mind since her manager was on vacation. Now she has a lot of free time. The building was illuminated by sunlight. The four of them were sitting at the table. Ikoma thanked Hashinen for today. She replied that it was nothing. She smiled and said that thanks to them, she earned some extra money and leveled up. Her eyes lit up and she said that if they really wanted to repay her somehow, they could report this baby to her just for a couple of videos. She pointed her hands at Akasha. Hashinen grabbed her cheeks and said that although this is just a summoned creature, she is so cute. One can only imagine if she dresses in a maid costume, the comments will simply be torn apart by cuteness. The young man looked at her seriously and apologized. No. The girl replied that he is very boring. The boy looked down and thought that Akasha was an unusual summoning creature that couldn't be shown to everyone. She was unique and intelligent. Akasha was eating a donut. The two stared intently. The boy thought that if he allowed Akasha to be filmed, the Chimera's Fang would figure out her location. Ikoma looked down and remembered Akasha's recent words, thought that they couldn't be ignored. It bothered him a lot. She hadn't spoken since then, but she was the key to solving the origin of the dungeon. The girl was covered in donut crumbs. The young man frowned and thought that he really wanted to know the whole truth about the dungeon. But would this world really end? Maybe there was something he hadn't paid attention to since being reborn. Satsuki wiped Akasha's mouth. The building stood. The young man thought that in 10 years the number of dungeons would decrease, but inflation would increase sharply. People would not be able to control this phenomenon. But how would their world come to an end? Ikoma frowned and thought that he, as a former S-rank adventurer, must change the predetermined fate of this world. But to do this, he needs to increase his level. But for him and Satsuki, the new dungeon was too difficult. He understood with a face and said that they would have to look for a fourth member of the group. Satsuki repeated in surprise. A new team member. The guy replied that they needed a new member of the group who could be trusted and who could deal the most damage. Remembering his battles, he said that although his class was universal, but in terms of damage, it was not as good as others. He remembered another fight and added that Satsuki class was also good, but it served more as a support. In the future, it would be much harder for them to fight if they did not find a permanent party member. Hashinen was not very interested in clearing dungeon. Hashinen looked at him in surprise. Remembering Cheyenne, he said that she had the same mobile class as him. She would not do either. He closed his eyes and said that there was also the leader of the Thunder Knights, but the girl said that it was not necessary. The girl put the can on the table and asked. He recently received rank B. She raised her hand and asked why he did not look for adventurers with the same rank. She was sure that he would find many strong singles who met his criteria. The young man looked down at the floor and thought, a talented adventurer of rank B with a combat class who would melt away on his own. He had one such acquaintance in his past life. But she, Ikoma, held the girl in his arms and wondered why she rushed to protect him. She raised her hand and asked if he was hurt. She began to caress Ikoma's cheeks and apologized for not having been in a party for long, but she was happy to work in a party with an adventurer like him. The weapon was lying on the ground. The young man pursed his lips and wondered if this girl was alive in this world. Someone else's question about what he was thinking about pulled him out of his thoughts, and he abruptly raised his head. Looking at the girl, he replied that he was just reminiscing. Looking into the distance, Ikoma thought that they would meet in about 3 years. At least that was the case in his past life. But would they meet in this world? The two walked down the corridor. The girl asked. Another dungeon was cleared. Good, no work was left. Satsuki said that she had never seen this girl here. Ikoma was surprised. Looking at the girl, he thought. This sword, this terrifying aura, could it be that? He remembered the girl lying in his arms. The young man suddenly rushed forward. Reaching out his hand to the girl, he asked if it was Mio by chance. The blonde turned to him. She screamed who he was. Satsuki approached them and asked if they knew each other. Ikoma frowned and said that he had heard a lot of rumors about her. A swordsman who had never lost a battle, a talented lone adventurer, and thought to himself that he could not act like old friends with her. The girl folded her arms across her chest. The guy turned to her and said that they were looking for a new member for their group and asked if she wanted to join. Mio looked at him intently and said to join them. He was so straightforward and thick-headed. She stamped her feet and said that she refused because she would never become a nanny for some helpless weaklings like the two of them. The blonde looked at them menacingly. Satsuki thought that Ikoma recognized her talent, since he even remembered her name, but she was just unbearable. The girl closed her eyes. Ikoma remained silent, frowning. Satsuki said that she didn't even know what they were capable of. How could she judge them just by their appearance? Mio, looking at her with disdain, said that she had been working with adventurers for a long time, and she could immediately tell who was worthy of her attention and who was not. The young man frowned and said that they were both around level 40 now, and they had experience capturing B-rank dungeon. Not a bad resume, didn't she think so? The girl looked into his eyes and then looked away. She turned away and said that their high levels meant nothing. The guy asked why she disliked being hired by other adventurers so much. The blonde remained silent. Ikoma started walking towards her, saying that since she didn't want to cuddle weaklings, how about testing their strength in the training arena? He came close. Looking into her eyes, he added that maybe then she could trust him to watch her back. Mio pushed him away and said that she wouldn't fall for such a stupid provocation. She wasn't interested in their group. She passed by Ikoma. He looked after her, thinking that after all, she didn't want to get close to anyone. The girl moved away from them. Satsuki came up from behind and asked if he seriously wanted to duel her since it was fashionable to get seriously hurt in the training arena, even if it was just a regular sparring match. Looking closely, she continued that usually in the training arena, an adventurer and a guild instructor fight, and for two adventurers to fight each other, permission from the administration must be obtained. Looking into the distance, Ikoma replied that this issue could be resolved, but she refused them, and not because she does not want to mess with weaklings. It's different. She realizes one simple thing. No one cares about her personality because everyone just wants to get her power because she has a rare Reaper class. The girl walked down the corridor. She raised her head. Two girls were discussing where they would go. Mia looked after them. She looked long and intently. She stood in place for a long time and the young man continued to say that the Reaper class is when she can defeat the enemy not only with physical strength but also with dark magic. No matter what enemy fights against her, she is able to defeat anyone. This class combines physical attacks and magic well. Anyone would want such a person in their group. Ikoma, looking at the floor, thought that she would achieve heights if she could save her life. The girl began to distance herself, saying that Ikoma had said that they needed to find someone they could rely on, but she doubted that she could get along with such a person. The guy tried to calm her down, saying that everything would be fine and that she was a reliable person, although she was very harsh with words. The girl looked down at the floor and said, "Well, if he says so." Only one window was lit in the house. Ikoma was sitting at the computer. The mage was sitting next to his hand. Looking at the screen, he thought that Mio always chose dangerous dungeons to study. She was the bravest girl he had ever seen. She hated weaklings and had a pretty bad character. She always refused to fully join the group and preferred the path of a loner. The girl looked menacingly. She indifferently passed by. The blonde was lying all in blood. In the past timeline, she was the one who saved his life. The young man moved the mouse on the table and thought that the path of a loner is full of dangers since he was able to slightly influence the course of this timeline in gratitude for saving her. He should make friends with her and save her life. The young man imagined her image in his head. Stretching on his chair, he asked Akasha if she thought he could persuade this stubborn woman to join him. Akasha turned away and stepped aside. She rose into the air and said that the power of one person could change the course of events. The young man looked at her in surprise and asked her what she was talking about, but she only smiled silently. The guy frowned. He looked at the man and asked why they came here. He replied that they needed to find a person in the group who could inflict huge damage on the enemy and distract them. Ikoma smiled and said that he knew just one such person. If he was given time, he could persuade her to join them. Ikoma entered the room. The girl began to move away from him. They were in a bookstore. Ikoma smiled, holding a book on how to make friends, a guide for dummies. They went to another building. He happily held a card in his hands. It was pouring rain on the territory of the dungeon. There was a warning sign. Mio rolled her eyes because it was him again. What was he doing here? The young man standing with his arms crossed over his chest said that many high-ranking adventurers go on raids and especially dangerous dungeons. His group will also participate in the capture of the poisonous blade. The group members were talking among themselves on the ground. Smiling, Ikoma continued that this was a great opportunity to see them in action and decide whether she wanted to join them or not. The girl looked with disdain. A monster appeared from the dungeon. The two looked at it. Ikoma jumped up in his chair. After clearing his throat, he thought that he must have fallen asleep because of the meeting with Mio. He indulged in memories. The young man looked at the screen and read that a new dungeon catastrophe had occurred near Tokyo where monsters were attacking people. The guy leafing through the news said that it rarely happens that such unstable dungeons appear. The situation is apparently critical since they are already assembling an emergency raid. And this is strange. Such anomalies should have appeared in 3 years. He looked closely at the screen. His eyes widened in surprise. He jumped up from his chair when he realized that the name of this dungeon was a poisonous blade. He thought that this was impossible. This dungeon should have appeared only in 3 years. The mage looked at him in surprise. He remembered that it was in this portal that Mio gave her life to save him. Ikoma looked with wide open eyes and did not understand what was happening here at all. The laptop stood open on the table. The building is illuminated by the sun. The girl approaches Ikoma and finds that it suits him very well. He thanks her friend for the compliment without emotion. Imagining herself in the ark with Ikoma, she says that she was very happy when he invited her to go shopping since she would never have thought that she would be helping him choose clothes. Looking at Ikoma, Satsuki asks if he wants them to always go shopping together from now on. Ikoma reads the news about the poison blade and the dungeon that was supposed to appear in 3 years. Satsuki calls him. Ikoma is tense. Remembering how Mio gave her life in this dungeon in order to save him, he realizes that given her character, she will take part in the raid this time too. Standing in front of a table that says that he is a thief, Ikoma realizes that now he has much more experience in clearing dungeon than in his past life. But his level is much lower compared to his past life. Behind the guy is written that he is a gravity master, and it seems to him that he still failed despite his level and skills at the time. Mio is serious and Ikoma seems that since her level is much higher than his, she will not listen to his advice. The girl screams. She pushes the guy away. Holding the phone in his hand, Ikoma thinks that he cannot leave her. Although it is very reckless with his level to go on a raid. Remembering how he holds Mio in his arms, Ikoma understands that this dungeon is also too dangerous, and he cannot ask Satsuki to go with him. Satsuki sees that her partner is in thought. She asks what happened to Ikoma since he has turned pale, but he assures her that everything is fine so there is no need to worry. Satsuki watches carefully. Ikoma stands with his back. The girl clasped her hands and called Ikoma. Taking the guy's hand, she states that if something is bothering him, he should just share it with her. Ikoma thinks about what to say and says her name. Looking at Ikoma, she explains that when he first invited her to his party, he said that he needed his strength, and hearing this, she was very happy. Ikoma hides the phone when Satsuki says that she hates herself for not always being able to come to his aid, although he needs it. She sternly asks him to rely on her. The guy is excited. Ikoma introduces the girl. Closing his eyes, Ikoma thanks Satsuki. The girl goes to a cafe. The phone shows a sign up for a raid on the Poison Blade dungeon, and Ikoma shares that she wants to take part in one raid. The girl looks at the screen and replies that she read about an emergency raid, asking why Ikoma wants to take part in it. Ikoma introduces Mio and asks her if she remembers the girl they met in the guild yesterday, and explains that she will participate in this raid and that she will die. Satsuki is shocked by the words that this girl will die. Folding his arms, the boy says that he understands how hard it is to believe, but he wants to make sure that Mio will be safe. Looking at Ikoma, Satsuki asks if he is sure that Miss Mio will even participate in the raid and why he assumed that she could die. Frowning, Ikoma asks Satsuki to listen to him carefully. Satsuki looks at him with interest. Presenting the film strips with images, Ikoma explains how all this time he said that he had a special item that helped him learn everything about new portals and special items. But it was a lie. And the truth is that he can see his future. Sitting at the table, Satsuki does not believe his words, but Ikoma replies that he understands that it sounds like the ravings of a man, and she may not believe him, but it is the truth. The girl looks out the window with concern. Ikoma looks sternly. Satsuki replies that she does not believe him. Recalling the Mad Theater and the Library of Mysteries, Satsuki adds that Ikoma has already proven it twice and knew every portal they cleared like the back of his hand. Smiling widely, Satsuki assures Ikoma that she trusts him and does not think that he would deceive her in such a stupid way. Ikoma enthusiastically turns to his friend and in his thoughts is glad that she believed him, but he is slightly worried about her blind faith. Smiling at the girl, Ikoma understands that she unconditionally believes everything he says and hopes that in the future there will be no problems with such things. The screen informs that this is Ikebana Station and there are 4 stations left until the destination. And while the train is moving, you need to hold on to the handrail and not lean against the sliding doors. The guy and the girl are riding on the train. Satsuki hears Ikoma's suggestion that this raid may be the most dangerous battle of all that they have ever taken part in. Standing at the door, Ikoma states that they need to be very careful. Satsuki reads on her phone that according to the article that the special forces posted, the local boss will be around level 65, which is not much different from Akasha. Ikoma introduces the monster, explaining that this boss will evolve during the raid and reach level 80, so they need to defeat it before it completes its evolution. The friend is shocked that the antagonist will reach level 80. Mio frowns and Ikoma states that to be honest, he would not like to participate in the raid or fight this boss at all. So, if they can't convince Mio to participate in the raid, they will have to go with her. Ikoma believes that at least 3 groups should participate in this raid, and they should coordinate with each other and come up with a plan to kill the boss. Satsuki thoughtfully lowered her gaze. Looking at her friend, she tells him that although he doesn't want to take part in the raid, he wants to save Miss Mio's life. Ikoma stands with his arms crossed and the girl asks if he had any connection with Miss Mio in the past. Holding his shoulder, Ikoma doesn't know how to tell her. Mio is wounded and bloody. The guy looks to the side and says that she saved his life. Satsuki is shocked that Miss Mio saved Ikoma's life. The train moves along the train tracks. Approaching the girl, Ikoma says that they came to take part in the raid. To which she replies that they must have come to them from another city, thanking them for their concern. She adds with a smile how glad she is that they came to help because in truth, few adventurers decided to take part in this raid. Ikoma put his hand to his chin when he heard 5 more adventurers arrive before them. Realizing that there are only 7 of them, Mio rudely calls out to the characters. She folds her arms and suddenly asks the characters what they are doing here. Thinking that they are following her and also repeats that she does not want to join their party. With a smirk, Ikoma does not understand what she is talking about and states that they just decided to participate in the raids since they are high enough level for it. The lady incredulously states that she does not remember them from the previous raid that took place in Kanto. Satsuki frowned and wondered how such a girl who hates the weak decided to save Ikoma. She tensed up when Mio asked why she was staring at her like that, to which Satsuki apologizes, assuring that everything is fine. Hanagasaki asks the guys if they decided to participate in the raid too. Looking at Satsuki, the man calls her a small fry, but thinks that it is better than nothing. Ikoma looks at the characters patch and thinks that these guys are not from a guild and do not look like adventurers from a special forces unit, and he has seen a similar logo on this patch somewhere. The guy looks seriously. Coins fall from above in front of the buildings and Ikoma explains that this is a commercial company that took a place in the entertainment industry and increased its image by maintaining public safety, and a company of adventurers undergoing special training for the sake of developing a business using class skills. The men talk and Ikoma is sure that in the future they will achieve great heights, but for now it is just a startup. The guy turns to Mr. Hanagasaki saying that they are representatives of the driving force so he needs to behave more politely with potential clients, to which he replies that he understood him and now Shiraki should apologize. Ikoma darkened. Standing in front of Satsuki, the boy apologizes for his boss's rudeness, explaining that he acts like a stubborn old man at times, but his personality is not that bad, and Satsuki replies that there is no need to apologize. Satsuki stands in front of the lady and is glad that at least someone with a normal personality. Ikoma looks at the man with the envelope who says that he will be glad to go through this raid with all of them. Showing the paper, the character says that he is a representative of the Shiraki Driving Force Company. Taking the business card, Ikoma seems to have his instincts as an adventurer with 10 years of experience telling him that this guy is not as simple as he seems. He looks sullenly, deciding that he should be on guard. Putting his hand on his chest, Shiraki expresses admiration for such young and talented adventurers like them. With a forced smile, the character adds that he hopes for their friendship with him. Purple smoke in the dungeon of the Poison Blade. Level 44 Bloodsuckers Crawl. The monster lets out a scream after hitting. Hanagasaki hits the antagonist with an axe. The man realizes that they are not attacking one by one but in a group, calling them smart creatures. Shiraki is behind the fighters and explains that this dungeon is called Anomalies, and because of it local monsters can be much stronger than those they fought before. The guy seriously states that there are 7 of them, so with a good strategy they can defeat them. He shouts at the guys not to panic and to cover them from behind. The warrior uses a deadly lunge. The fighters run to attack. The girl uses the life drain technique. Looking at the allies, Ikoma thinks that they work well as a team. Looking at the man and the girl, Ikoma thinks that those two are an offensive force and get rid of a large number of enemies in the shortest time. The guy is fighting bloodsuckers and Ikoma understands that this character is covering them, distracting stronger enemies. Looking at the leader, Ikoma sees how he stands behind and watches his comrades. And if the situation is critical, he will join the fight and cover the rest. When Satsuki uses a bullet of darkness, Ikoma reflects that the main thing in teamwork is not only to effectively divide the roles among themselves, but it is also important that the leader can cope with his comrades. An explosion occurs in front of the character. Ikoma strikes with a sword. There is a scar on the back of a level 44 bloodsucker. Satsuki looks at the system and understands that this is an ordinary monster, but it has a lot of health. She shouts at Ikoma that there are too many opponents, and they should be dealt with in one blow using gravity magic. But the guy replies that this is a bad idea because he will spend extra mana on such a powerful attack, and they can defeat them one by one. So there is no need to worry. Ikoma runs, hearing that a dungeon boss is waiting for them ahead and they need to conserve their strength as much as possible. Mio rushes forward using a crimson blade. A large explosion was heard behind the lady. Ikoma, looking at what is happening, understands that this was expected of Mio and that in the past and in this life he has not met an adventurer who could lay down such a strong monster in one blow. The girl stands with a sword and Ikoma is sure that her class has destructive power, and at the moment among all of them she is the strongest adventurer in their group. The bloodsucker trembles and Ikoma understands that he is still alive, but he only has enough health for one blow, which is an ideal opportunity. Turning to his companion, he asks Satsuki to drain all the mana from the enemy. The hand pushes the girl back. Hanagasaki makes a blow with the help of Heavenly Dungeon. Shiraki smiles and states that his boss is as energetic as ever. The system opens up in front of Ikoma and Ikoma asks if Hanagasaki has managed to level up, asking him to listen. Standing in front of the man, he explains that the person who dealt the final blow to the monster gets more experience points. And besides, they still needed him alive, so it's not nice to come and take away their loot, but he asks why they feel sorry to give him one monster. Throwing up his hands, the boss says that there are still enough monsters for everyone, not understanding since when adventurers have become so petty. But Ikoma replies that the man deliberately pushed Satsuki away to take their experience. With a sly smile, Hanagasaki asks him not to nag him and adds that elders should be given in, calling Ikoma a brat. The guy frowns, but Satsuki asks him not to quarrel with them. Seeing Shiraki clapping his hands with Hanagasaki, she explains that for adventurers, level is an indicator of skill and there is an unspoken rule among adventurers that the one who deals the most damage to the enemy finishes off the monster. Clenching his fist, Ikoma decides that after such an act, he will never go into the dungeon with such people. Even though this is a one-time raid, but trust after this will definitely not increase. Turning his head, the man is perplexed how he can cover for someone who is so piggishly taking his experience. Shiraki runs up to the boss asking what all the noise is about, to which he replies that the kids are just upset with him because of all sorts of nonsense. Waving his hand, Hanagasaki calls for an assistant since they still have a lot of things to do and a lot of experience that the kids can still get. And if they stand and sulk, then in the end they will not get anything. Holding the back of his head, Shiraki apologizes to Ikoma, realizing that some misunderstanding has arisen between him and Hanagasaki. Covering his eye, Ikoma replies that everything is fine, considering that maybe he was too harsh with him. Raising his hands up, Shike shouts that he wants all of Japan and even the whole world to know about their feat in this dungeon due to the fact that the special forces are gradually beginning to spread their influence to the dungeon, and free lone adventurers cannot reveal their potential because of them. The guy happily adds that he thinks that corporate adventurers are the future because they also want to achieve safe portal clearing. Satsuki says with a smile that Shiraki is very ambitious in his plans. Hanagasaki smiles. The girl looks at him seriously. The boy looks at him carefully. Shike explains that there is one problem with leveling up, which is that their team is not able to level up that fast, so they take every opportunity. Ikoma, frowning, thinks that this is true since the higher the adventurer's rank, the harder it is to earn experience, especially if they are in a team of 4. Because even in a group, conflicts can arise about the unequal distribution of experience points. Shiraki, turning his head, explains that because of this problem they constantly had difficulties in controlling their comrades. So they asked Hanagasaki for that stupid misdeed since he also wants to be useful in the future. The girl walking next to Ikoma says that the burden of corporate adventurers is heavy and wishes them luck in leveling up. While under the tree, Shiraki explains to the guys that it seems the special forces have not yet explored the right passage and that they should stop for a while because their duties also include drawing up a map. The warriors go forward, standing still. Ikoma believes that something still doesn't add up. Remembering the fight, he says that in battle, the guy could control his subordinates very well, and they obeyed his orders without question. Remembering Shiraki's stern face, Ikoma says that now he declares that he cannot control their behavior in the dungeon. Looking at Ikoma's back, Ikoma considers him a bad leader since his subordinates do not listen to him. The guy looks after the walking Shiraki. In the cave, the man says that the dungeon anomaly was not as terrible as they said. The warriors are in the gorge. The guy tells the boss that they were also chosen for this raid according to their rating. Looking at the social rating among the employees of Ovid Shisela for the third quarter, he thought that it would be much more difficult here since he even had to go through a selection process. Hanagasaki and his assistant look at the guy smiling. Shiraki hopes that their hike along the dungeon will be just as easy and asks Mr. Hanagasaki not to let his guard down. Ikoma and the girl hear Ikoma's words that they were sent on this raid as representatives of the company so they all cannot fall flat on their faces. Satsuki, standing next to Ikoma, understands what it means that all these people among other company employees turned out to be stronger than others. Ikoma looks at the people and thinks that this raid is different from anything these guys have ever seen since the dungeon anomaly is only progressing, and albeit slowly, but eventually they will face serious consequences. The man lies on the ground and Ikoma remembers how in the past timeline they came to the boss in the middle of his evolution, so it is possible that the same thing will happen now. Behind Ikoma, the lady and Ikoma explain that the purpose of his presence here is research as well as to stop Mio if she gets into a fight with the boss, and all he needs is to make a convincing report for the guild so that the special forces will pay attention to this dungeon, and thus the dungeon of the poisonous blade will be dealt with by trained member. Introducing the fighters, the guy understands that everyone here wants to prove themselves by defeating the boss, but he needs to somehow convince them not to fight him. And besides, Mio is very stubborn and simply convincing her will not work. Shiraki talks to Hanagasaki. Looking to the side, Ikoma thinks that in order to fulfill this goal, he must be convincing and eloquent enough. His attention is attracted to something. Shiraki approaches Mio and Ikoma wants to understand what the leader of the group wants to talk to her about. The characters walk and Shiraki tells Mio that he has heard a lot about her, and that she is quite popular among solo adventurers. Smiling, the guy is surprised that she only recently received B rank but has already participated in many raids. Satsuki remains silent. With his arms outstretched, Shiraki happily says that it is a great honor for him to meet such a legendary solo adventurer, as she calls her incredibly talented. Looking forward, Mio tells him to stop talking nonsense, and if he has something to say it directly. Ikoma is stunned by these words. He smirks. Shiraki stretches out his hand and declares that he wants Mio to be his right hand and a member of the driving force, as he is sure that someone like her can handle such a job. The character stares and adds that besides, if she joins them, he is sure that thanks to her talents, they will be able to develop their company much faster. So he tells the lady that he wants to protect their country from the dungeon together with her. Satsuki looks at Shiraki and calls him an eloquent man, but according to Ikoma, Lady Mio will immediately refuse him. The lady frowns and replies that she is not interested, and Satsuki thinks that she was short and to the point. Shiraki insistently says that she should not worry, and if she becomes his right hand, he will gather as many capable adventurers as he can. Before he can finish his sentence about how he is not as strong as her, the girl tells him to shut up. As she leaves, Mio says that she is not going to join anyone's group, so she asks him not to talk to her anymore since she chose the path of solitude because she wanted to. Standing next to Ikoma, she shares that she has been encountering more and more persistent guys lately. Looking at Ikoma, she adds that she only joined them for the duration of the raid and that after it they will go their separate ways. Shiraki comes up from behind and warns that the higher her level gets, the harder it is to maintain a solo adventure career, since at high levels going into an A-rank dungeon or higher alone can be too dangerous. Looking ahead, the lady declares that she will stick to her path for the rest of her life. Koma looks thoughtful. He hears Satsuki say that Lady Mio always says and does things that make the atmosphere in the air very tense. Hanagasaki stands in front of Ikoma and calls them kids. Grinning, he asks if he has seen how nice their boss is to them. The man asks in return not to get under their feet. The boy and girl watch silently. Ikoma replies that their allies are eager to prove themselves in the raid, and in the meantime their boss is trying to attract even more workers to his company. So it seems like they are not doing very well. Hanagasaki is furious at these words. He aggressively yells at Ikoma to watch his language. The girl replies that he is trying to quarrel with them again, and turning to Mr. Shiraki states that the man is trying to create a conflict out of thin air. Frowning, Ikoma says that he will not care about Shiraki's words since this guy is not a leader at all and everyone listens to him only during battles out of fear of him. Hanagasaki, standing next to the boss, is very indignant. Shiraki suddenly looks away. The girl wants to ask her friend what he is talking about, and why they are afraid of the boss. Remembering the pictures of the past, Ikoma said that with strangers, this guy is kind and always apologizes if his subordinates do something wrong, but never scolds them, trying to create a friendly atmosphere. Ikoma sternly adds that as soon as the battle begins, everyone obeys Shiraki unquestioningly because in battle, you need to be much more obedient than with ordinary people. The boss narrowed his eyes. Mio hears the words of Ikoma that the boss cannot boss others around through fear since it is important for him to save face and good relations with unfamiliar adventurers. Shiraki, standing next to Hanagasaki, hears Ikoma's statement that if it comes to that, then he wants to say that they can obey him like dogs but not him. Shiraki explains with a smile that there must have been some misunderstanding between them, and turning to Mr. Ikoma, he adds that he must be tired of his subordinates' attacks and he is very sorry about it, but they should calm down and work together during the raid with a smirk. Ikoma replies that they will work together, but he will not try for their company so that they get high stats after the raid is completed. Purple flames are emanating from behind Ikoma. The cave glows purple. The characters walk through it. Walking next to the guy, Satsuki tells Ikoma that it is hardly worth arguing with him in such a place. Ikoma emotionlessly replies that maybe not, but he is tired of being manipulated from the outside and he thought that he is doing a good job as a captain. Hanagasaki gritted his teeth when he heard the boss's words that he seemed to have become a nanny for 3 since they were already well over 20. But all they could do was fight. Looking towards Ikoma, Shiake realized that on top of everything else, it was in this raid that a smart guy appeared who was expressing his dissatisfaction. Remembering the guy with the gun, he adds that he is quite experienced and strong, and besides he is not afraid to express his opinion, assuming that Ikoma saw through him. Shiraki also remembers the social rating among the employees of the CSR department for the half year, realizing that he agreed to this raid only because he would be able to quickly raise his level and also earn the respect of the company. But he does not know if he can hold out with an uncontrollable and arrogant guy. Closing his eyes, Ikoma believes that nevertheless with someone like him, he should be more careful. Ikoma looks forward to it seriously. Mio frowned. Shiraki looks away. Bloodsuckers have appeared in front of Ikoma, and they understand that a new wave of monsters is approaching. With a malicious grin, Shiraki decides that this is the perfect chance to sort out the misunderstanding between him and Ikoma. He smiles evilly, realizing that it's high time to put him in his place. The level 47 killer mantis growls. Standing with his friends, Hanagasaki suggests squashing these damn bugs as soon as possible. Ikoma frowns and realizes that their opponents are level 47, and the deeper they go, the more often they meet strong opponents. He remembers how they used to meet low-level fleas. Looking at the mantis, the guy adds that these guys are not only high level, but also have powerful blade paws and a strong body. Ikoma is tense because he knows that the antagonists have absolutely no magical skills, but they compensate for their lack with their physical superiority. So, the best way to deal with them is to hit their belly, and he thinks who is capable of such a powerful blow. Calling Mio, Ikoma warns her that it is too dangerous to come close to them, so he should not run at him alone and let them too. As she leaves, the lady replies that he should stop talking nonsense since she can handle them herself. The girl hits the killer mantis with a sword. Ikoma looks at this. The enemies approach Satsuki. clenching her fist and closing her eyes. Ikoma understands that he told her this, but she never listens to anyone and gets into dangerous situations. So, there is no choice and she will have to fight. Ikoma shouts for Satsuki to help Mio and he attacks these mantises from behind. People from the other team think that the battle promises to be interesting. Shiraki looks sternly, deciding that it's time to put this impediment guy in his place. Shiraki remembers a picture where Ikoma told him that the others can listen to him like dogs, but not him since they will work together. But for the sake of their careers, he will not lift a finger. The guy smirks. The foot hits Hanagisaki's face and the system reports to Training Ground A. The guys see how Shiraki kicks the henchman and understand that it is better not to get involved, otherwise they will get it too. Shiraki with blood on his face looks sullen and thinks that being a leader is not only a big responsibility, but also a leader is obliged to educate his subordinates. Beaten Hanagisaki lies on the ground and tells Shiraki that he realized his mistakes and asks for forgiveness. The other warriors watch in horror. Looking ahead, Shiraki decides that fear is the best teacher for such idiots, and he will prove to Ikoma that he is capable of risking his life for others. Giving commands, he orders 3 warriors to take the bugs on the right and he will control the situation in the center. Hanagisaki obeys Shiraki. Ikoma looks sideways at Mio. The lady says that the enemy is strong and very agile. However, his attacks are too indiscriminate. The monster runs to attack. The lady prepares to strike. She sees Shiraki in front of her. He has put up a protective barrier. Turning around, he tells Mio with a smile that it is quite dangerous to fight alone and he will cover her, so there is no need to worry. She angrily shouts at him not to interfere in her fight, calling him an idiot. Shiraki smirks. Being among the fighters, Shiraki realizes that standing in the center, he can watch Ikoma and come to the rescue at the right moment. The sword hit the ground in front of Ikoma. Satsuki decides to use the bullet of darkness now. An explosion was heard above the mantis. Swinging his sword, Ikoma understands that now the enemy needs to cut off his paws and shouts to Satsuki that she did everything perfectly. The guy hits the mantis with double gravity. The enemy sees a warrior in front of him. Meteors slash on the antagonist from above. Satsuki looks sadly from the realization that Ikoma spends too much mana on ordinary monsters and needs to finish this fight as soon as possible. Standing in front of the enemy, Ikoma says that he can't put up with Shiike and Mio is busy with other bugs, so he doesn't have time to drag out this fight. The mantis trembles, frowning. Ikoma calls him stubborn. Shiraki looks at the guy from behind and is surprised that his attacks were so fast and powerful because he has never seen anything like it before. Thinking back to Ikoma's attacks, Shiraki realizes that he shouldn't underestimate him as his class combines great mobility in combat, and his combat skills are simply incredible. The character ponders that if Ikoma had joined the driving force, their company would have reached a new level. If only adventurers did not exist then. Shiraki listens to the boss who praises him for organizing a special corporate unit of adventurers and training them so that they can bring corporate benefits in the future. The man adds with a smile that many of the upper management laughed at his ideas, but so be it. He will sponsor the boss if he shows good results in the next mission. Looking sternly, Shiraki realizes that if he can stand out in this raid, he will prove to everyone what he is capable of and will not let Ikoma take all the glory for himself. The guy calls out to Amamiya. Looking away, he declares that the battle is coming to an end. Covering her mouth with her fingers, he asks the girl to pretend that she accidentally injured Ikoma during the fight. Satsuki is confused and Shiraki thinks that during the battle in the dungeon, people are more focused on the monsters than their allies and he will not even realize that it happened on purpose. Ikoma stands and Shiraki realizes that if this is the only way to rein this guy in, he will definitely do it. Closing her eyes, Amamiya does not know what Shiraki is thinking. A man approaches Shiraki. Ikoma swings his sword. As the girl runs towards Ikoma, he declares that they are almost done. Bringing the sword forward, Amamiya apologizes in her mind, but knows that if she does not follow Shiraki's orders, he will definitely kill her. Frowning, Satsuki suggests that if she hits him in the shoulder, he will not be seriously injured. Ikoma looks back. The girl strikes with a laser shot. The girl frowned and used a laser shot. Ikoma looked back, thinking that the shot happened at a long distance. She looked ahead from under her brows, confident that he would not dodge. Ikoma stood between the enemy and the insect, and she understood that on one side there was a monster, and on the other, she and he would not have time to deal with them with one blow. Ikoma looked ahead and smiled. A powerful blow occurred, and the insect's head was cut off from the body. The magic hand was aiming for the target. Amamiya stood behind Ikoma tied with strong threads, and someone was using shadow feeders. She looked away thinking that she could not move. Ikoma looked away and thanked Satsuki for her help. His partner looked at the enemy, and the guy said that she covered his back. Mio frowned, asking how she should understand this, and turned to her opponent. The lady looked down in confusion and said that she was aiming at the monster and slightly misjudged the force of the blow. The man looked back thinking that no one should be entrusted with even the simplest task because despite their age, the couple was very experienced. The man stood next to the monster and thought that they were ready for any emergency. The insect looked forward. Ikoma frowned and called out to him. The girl looked back while he said that the fight was not over yet and they should not relax. The monster crouched. He rushed forward using ice needles. The projectiles hit the former opponent. The man grinned and was dissatisfied with the fact that such bugs can use magic. The girl was wounded and he thought that it was a mistake to send Amamiya so close to the enemy. Hiraki turned to Ikoma, ordering him to heal her ward right now, and noted that the man would accompany her. The bearded man looked away and said that he had not finished her off yet. Ikoma stood in front of the man in glasses and blocked the enemy's attack with his sword. He looked away and said that they were not their concern now, and noted that he could handle it himself, asking him to help her faster. People ran back while Ikoma stood in a stance. Shiraki passed by the fighter. He walked and grinned. The guy sat in front of the girl on his knee and looked at her significant wounds. Ikoma pulled out the sword and the monster's body and said that they were finally done here, and a notification about gaining experience and leveling up appeared. A powerful cut occurred in front of Amamiya's face. The insect's head flew off to the side. The partners looked away and Satsuki asked if it was worth helping those at all if the lady was doing an excellent job herself. She looked ahead and said that they risked their lives because of their own carelessness and the mistake of their comrade Tech. The fighters looked around, meaningfully silent, and she said that if she had hesitated even for a second, her partner would have been seriously injured. Shiraki stood next to Ikoma, putting his hand on his head, and said that she did not want this at all. And it seems there was another misunderstanding on their part, to which Ikoma asked to stop with this false politeness. He looked ahead and meaningfully silent, while Ikoma said that the three of them also unconditionally obeyed him during the fight. The fighter looked away, saying that Amamiya would never have made such a mistake with such strict control. Satsuki looked at her interlocutors with displeasure, thinking that they were not to blame because they were under the control of their leader. But if she continued to turn a blind eye to this, someone could get hurt again. The girl folded her arms and thought that even if she tried to report this incident to the guild, it would be hard to prove that it was not an accident, and so she had no other choice. Amamiya was lying on the floor with wounds. Ikoma looked away saying that she was lucky that she was not seriously injured, but this could not continue, and noted that they had a fight with the boss ahead, but he had spent almost all of his mana due to the mistakes of his subordinates. They looked at each other and Ikoma said that in order to avoid casualties, he wanted to finish their investigation of the dungeon right now. The lady stood between them and said that she was tired of the conflict, and asked them to sort things out somewhere else, noting that she was not going to leave here until she defeated the boss. Ikoma expressed dissatisfaction, grinning, and thought that he decided to come here only for her sake, and that Mio had too purposeful a character, bordering on madness, but he could not leave her here completely alone. The gray-eyed woman looked ahead, saying that all they did during the entire raid was sort out relationships between each other, and noted that they would only interfere during the battle with the boss, and was sure that she could handle the boss herself. Ikoma looked ahead and said that she hated working in a team. She was shocked after the question about not liking teams because her comrade died because of her fault. Satsuki was surprised and a powerful cut occurred. The mistress's sword was approaching Ikoma's throat. Mio looked at him from under her brows and did not understand how he found out. He looked at the tip of the blade and was meaningfully silent. The girl put away the sword and clicked her tongue. Mio walked to the side and said that they could finish the research, but she would not continue on to the boss since they were only getting in her way anyway. Ikoma looked at the figure leaving and asked them to stop. Hiraki looked away and thought with displeasure that he could not let her leave in this situation. The guy imagined himself standing next to the woman and thinking that in the past timeline he learned about this, and from the words of the guild members with whom he went on raids, he assumed that these were just rumors. But now everything fell into place. Ikoma looked back and said that he would go after Mio. He remembered holding her in his arms and thinking that if he let her leave, history would repeat itself again. Hiraki blocked their path and ordered them to stop. He extended his hand, and when asked what he needed, he answered that they cannot be separated since Amamiya can no longer fight. The guy hugged the wounded woman and they needed to fight together because if Ikoma left now, the raid would automatically fail. Ikoma looked away and was silent. The commander frowned, thinking that if he could convince him, they would be able to continue the cleanup. They stood in front of each other, and he could not return from this dungeon with nothing. The leader extended his hand, blocking the guy's path. The guy stood next to the injured woman, thinking that she would no longer be able to fight and they needed to escort her to a safe place. The partners looked ahead, and if they left after Mio, their raid would be over. The guy remembered the man, and he could not allow this to happen. He looked down and said that she herself made this decision thinking that without them he would not be able to achieve the desired result. The lady moved away from the group and he said that he understood the concerns of those, but she herself decided to go on without them. He raised his finger and said that now they need to stick together for their own safety. Ikoma looked ahead and said that he was telling him about safety after he ordered Amamiya to attack him, and noted that it was very funny and asked him not to interfere, letting him pass. The commander spread his hands saying that it was a common misunderstanding because he had already explained, and noted that he understood that he did not want to have anything to do with him and offered a profitable deal for both of them. He showed 2 fingers and said that he would pay each of them 2 million if they agreed to continue investigating the dungeon with him. Ikoma was wary of such an offer. Shiraki looked at him through his fingers, assuming that he already understood everything himself, but he needed to clear this dungeon at any cost, and he would do everything for this. Ikoma was silent while he asked why they had not met before today, and why he would take such a risk when he could easily earn a lot of money. The bearded man looked at the boss and said that he didn't have that kind of money, to which the boss replied that if they cleared this dungeon, he would have much more than 2 million. He looked ahead from under his brows and thought that if he could prove that their team was capable of handling such difficult tasks, then his project would be sponsored. The creature was standing near the Ferris wheel and he thought that he would receive not only money but also power, and noted that he had gone very far. A smile appeared on his face, and he thought that he had come so far, and being literally a step away from his goal, he was not going to retreat. He raised his hands and said that everyone could be bought, and these youngsters especially, and noted that Ikoma's fighting skills were simply incredible. Obsession was visible on his face, and he said that after clearing the dungeon he would be happy to work with him, and with his connections and with his skills. He blushed and said that they would be able to stand at the top of a powerful corporation, and money, fame, respect, everything would be at his disposal, but Ikoma said that he refused it. He stood in front of the interlocutor, and said that he was not going to work with a person like that. Yellow Eyes was dissatisfied and asked again. Ikoma put his hand on his shoulder, and said that he would go look for Mio before it was too late, and asked him to step aside and that he should escort Amamiya to the exit. The victim closed her eyes. Shiraki put his hand on Ikoma's shoulder, and asked if he had heard him, mentioning that he would pay 2 million and that it would be the easiest money in his life. He pointed his finger up, saying that if this was a small price for the guy, then he could pay more, and promised that he would pay as soon as they cleared the dungeon. Ikoma looked back, saying that unlike that he became an adventurer to help people, and money and connections do not bother him much. He hit the interlocutor's hand and said that his decision has not changed in any way and asked not to waste his time. Shiraki smirked and said that since he didn't want to. His attention fell on Satsuki and he asked her to leave her with him. He put his hand on her hair, asking if he wanted to save Mio like that, and said that she didn't ask for it at all. But as a leader, he can't let his partner go with him. He smiled nastily, asking if he thought that if he let her go with him, she would be in great danger. Ikoma looked at him with disgust. Shiraki folded his arms, saying that as a good leader and the head of the driving force, he is responsible for the safety of each member of the team. Satsuki looked ahead with displeasure, and thought that he wasn't worried and just wanted to delay them. Ikoma looked ahead, and when asked what his level was, He answered that he was level 50. The commander smiled, saying that he was the same. He looked towards the guy and offered a bet. He extended his hand forward, saying that they would fight for the leader's place, and the loser would be obliged to obey the winner unquestioningly until the end of the raid. The bearded man looked at him and said that it was too dangerous to fight inside the dungeon. He reached into his sheath for his sword and said that a conflict had broken out between the group members. He took out his weapon, saying that in order to settle it, they needed to fight the hierarchy in their group once and for all, and asked him what he thought. Satsuki was tense and asked what kind of nonsense it was, fighting in the dungeon before the boss and wasting mana for it. Ikoma stood next to him and agreed to fight. He took out his sword and said that he wanted to end this quickly, and that they would no longer get in the way of his feat. The fighter looked to the side and thought that he had not yet met a single person who could defeat the boss. But that brat had a rare class, and whoever won this battle would seriously hurt both sides, and the boss is not an idiot and understands this. Shiraki stood with his back to his charges and called their names. He looked back and ordered them to help him. They were confused and did not believe in what was happening while he ordered them to do it faster. Hanagasaki used magic and looked at his fist. The guy took out a sword and it was shown with a bright light, and a notification about super speed came out. They looked forward and a notification about steel skin and increased magic came out while Shiraki looked forward and grinned. Magic enveloped his hands and he felt a wonderful feeling. The leader smiled and offered to begin, noting that this was their fair fight. Satsuki stood opposite and asked what kind of nonsense he was talking about and how this was a fair fight. The fighters looked around while she said that he made his subordinates with the help of abilities strengthen their characteristics in every possible way in order to save his own mana for the fight with Ikoma. Ikoma lowered his head down while he said that initially he had about 42 points of magic, and thanks to the enhancements, his magical and physical indicators increased twofold. The commander looked away, saying that he was definitely superior in strength. He put his hand on his hair and said that before it was too late, he could give up and admit defeat. Because even though they had the same levels, thanks to the enhancements, going into battle against him would be unwise because Ikoma would have to spend too much mana to win. He put his hand on his neck, thinking that he could not admit defeat, and noted that fear paralyzed the human mind. Ikoma puts his hand on his head, thinking that Shiraki realizes this and manipulates people through fear and tries to do the same with him, demonstratively forcing him to strengthen him, offering to give up before it's too late, and said that he was watching. Shiraki smiled, asking that without the help of others, he was no longer capable of anything. He froze and did not understand what happened. Ikoma looked ahead and said that he was in a hurry and therefore asked to finish it as soon as possible. The leader looked ahead from under his brows and thought that he was a bastard. The bearded man looked at the opponent and did not understand what the guy was thinking about because right before his eyes, they strengthened Shiraki in every possible way with different spells. He remembered how their leader humiliated the guy and thought that after that he would definitely not be able to resist him. Ikoma looked ahead and thought about the enemy's class, and a notification about the paladin class came out. The warrior stood holding a sword in his hands, and this was the ideal class for a leader because paladins have a good basic attack, high defense, and a predisposition to magic. Shiraki smiled nastily, and this class did not suit him because the enhancements gave completely opposite characteristics. Shiraki stood in front of him and asked him why he was still eager to fight and was so sure that he could defeat him. He smiled and thought that in this fight it was clear that he would win, and agreeing to fight was a stupid idea. He became serious after the order to stop chatting. Ikoma looked ahead, saying that if he did not hurry then all his enhancements would wear off. Shiraki looked into the darkness. He rushed to attack, saying that he was a self-confident idiot. Satsuki watched what was happening and admired his speed. The leader swung his sword at him. There was a blow and a bright flash illuminated the silhouette of the girl. Ikoma breaks on the surface with his feet. The bearded man looked to the side and asked if she saw everything herself, saying that the bastard was not their boss's equal. He looked ahead and said that, to be honest, even without enhancements, he was very strong. The warrior adjusted his clothes and looked ahead. Ikoma looked ahead and he believed that only the local boss could defeat their boss. There was a powerful explosion that blocked the view of the battle. The girl looked ahead and thought that her partner had a very mobile class, and with the help of gravity, he would be able to dodge in time and stop the enemy in time. She joined her hands and thought that at least she wanted to believe in it. The leader looked ahead thinking that he decided to dodge all attacks and noted that this was strange. He looked at the opponent and said that he understood, expressing his thoughts. The guy stood next to Amamiya. While he said that he was in a hurry to upset him, as soon as the old enhancements were off, his comrades would help him again. The main one raised an eyebrow saying that he would not be able to cope with him alone. He concentrated his attention on the opponent and said that strength is known in numbers. The building was lit by the sun and he realized that when he was still a schoolboy, the students were dressed in uniform and he was always a gifted child. He could devote little time to studying and sports events, but still remained the best. He walked along the corridor and the boys looked at him, and seeing such an ideal student, others looked at him with envy. He was on all fours and the bullies asked if he could not get up. There was a satisfied expression on their faces and they asked about the fact that he could not fight back against ordinary school children. He looked ahead and the scum gathered in a group and beat him up after school. There was a sign on the wall with a male figure, and if they fought one-on-one then none of them would stand against him, and at that moment he realized that a person is powerless against the crowd. The bag lay on the floor and from then on he began to study human psychology. He was serious and decided to become an adventurer to make a lot of money and go into business. So he came to Black Steel and thought that he would create a new generation of corporate adventurers. He said that no matter how hard he tried to dodge, the fighter swung and said that it would all end in one blow. Ikoma looked ahead and noticed that he was talking too much. He counterattacked the guy and he flew to the side. He held his torso and groaned in pain. Shiraki rested his hands on the floor, not understanding what happened and why it hurt so much. Ikoma walked away from him and said that he just hit him with the blunt side of the sword. The bearded man frowned, saying that it was impossible and thought that they strengthened Shiraki before the fight and did not understand how he was able to attack the main one. The leader stood up saying that this was nonsense and asking why the guy was able to attack him. Ikoma looked away from him. Shiraki remembered how he swung at the guy and Ikoma said that his body was not adapted to such a number of enhancements. He remembered how he swung and said that although he had become stronger and faster, there was no point in it since the body could not cope with such a number of forces. Ikoma looked back over his shoulder, saying that he gave him the right to attack first, that he himself realized this, that even with enhancements, his body was still weak. The bearded man stood next to the satisfied girl and thought that he was weak from the very beginning, and the boy realized this from the first blow. His gaze froze, and he thought that they did not help Shiraki at all, but made him even weaker. Shiraki held his hand to his jaw and said that he seemed to have lost his vigilance, but it was okay. It would not happen again. He looked angry and said that he was in vain not to attack him with the tip of the sword and noted that the guy missed his chance to win. He frowned and thought that he had to win, otherwise he wouldn't be able to prove his strength to others. Ikoma stood in front of him, and he thought that no matter how much he tried to weaken his resolve, he was still indifferent. He gritted his teeth, thinking that he was giving into emotions because of this brat and losing. He looked down at the sword, saying that there were 3 minutes left until the end of the enhancements, and in that time, he had to defeat the enemy. They stood in front of each other, and he thought that he could win with the help of the paladin's magic and the enhancement of his comrades. Ikoma was calm and said that he could no longer ask for help from his subordinates. Shiraki froze and did not understand anything, and he said that it was pointless. Ikoma looked ahead and said that he would not allow him from now on even to hit him. Shiraki frowned and asked again with aggression.